George Kilpatrick here with United Democrats of Onondaga County, and we're joined by Mike Montes. He's a candidate for Onondaga County Sheriff. Now, we would normally be coming to you a little bit earlier than we are now if you're live on Monday night, August the 20th. And so we ran into a few technical difficulties, but thank you to the Onondaga County Democratic Committee because they came through and allowed us to reboot and reshare and really get to learn about someone who wants to be your next sheriff. So let's introduce everyone to Mike Montes. Mike, good to meet you.
George, good to meet you.
Thank you for joining us. And we want to remind you, by the way, that we are live, so we're taking your questions. What questions do you have for the next sheriff of Onondaga County? What concerns do you have as a community? What do you think about the protection in your neighborhood, about services in your neighborhood? You have questions about the Justice Center. What are your questions for Mike Montes? Put them right down there in the comment section and we'll get to your questions. Over the past few weeks, we've had so many questions that we haven't been able to get to all of them. So if you get your question in early, we're certain to get to you. But first, let's introduce Mike. Once again, Mike, tell us a little bit about your background. I understand that you're a big Cubs fan and you grew up in Chicago.
I am a big Cubs fan. So that part of 2016 was a good year for the Cubs. So, and when I was 16 years old, we moved to Muskegon, Michigan, and then I went to Michigan State University. So part of my life has been in the Midwest, but we now call Syracuse home and been here for about 20 years and raised our kids here.
Yeah, so you have how many kids?
I have two kids. I have Michaela, who's my junior in college, and Matt will be a freshman. I'm taking him back tomorrow. So.
Yeah, getting on road trip, but you're about to be an empty nester, huh?
We are, which is going to be very strange to have that. We've been taking the kids to school for so long. So now it's a new chapter in our life and getting the kids ready to start their lives. So
you did something very interesting as a junior in college, which sort of started your career in public service. What'd you do?
So in college, I had an opportunity to be part of the cooperative education program, which actually started my federal career while I was a junior in college. The only condition is to serve 1 year during my college career, working for the federal government, and then upon graduation, I would have 4 months to convert that into a law enforcement position with the federal government, which I then did do. But I had a choice when I graduated. I called up and they said, "Let me let you know what I have. I'll call you back. Talk to my old boss." And he goes, "Okay, Houston, Texas, or New York City." So I chose Houston, Texas. At $16,000 a year, I think that was probably a better start. So
it probably was. And so you retired from what branch?
I retired from the Defense Criminal Investigative Service 2 years ago after 27 years of law enforcement.
And what did that involve?
So I guess I want to go back to my customs part because it kind of tied in together how it all worked together. When I was with Customs, I started in the aviation interdictions. So I flew on jets and helicopters, and our goal was to stop the flow of narcotics from coming into the United States. Worked on that a number of years. I spent a lot of time in South America and other different operations, specific operations, in order to help curb that flow of narcotics. And as I got more senior, I decided to go into investigations, and then I probably did somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,500 criminal investigations, either worked them myself, supervised them, or just a very in-depth sort of type of cases, full from money laundering, narcotics, to bribery, kickbacks, all different types of cases. In 2003, the Department of Homeland Security was created. In 2002, I was transferred to Washington, D.C. to be part of that, putting that together. But what I found, it was an opportunity to move from U.S. Customs, which was then going to be under Homeland Security, to the Defense Criminal Investigative Service, which is a Department of Defense agency. And then I was the program director for national security, overseeing like 400 special agents working national security cases.
Big job.
It was a big job, and it was interesting work. It was something that I got to see different every day and have that national perspective. And that's what I want to bring to Onondaga County Sheriff's Department, is a big perspective and knowing what's the priorities of the day that we need to put our resources to.
You talked about the work in the criminal investigations unit in the Justice Department. You work with customs, but you also have a military background.
I do. So I have almost 20 years in the U.S. Navy Reserve. I've deployed to Korea, and I've also deployed to Iraq. And I'm also currently an executive officer of a large intelligence unit in Rome, New York. So I have about 80 people I directly oversee. And our goal as a reservist is the number one mission is to have sailors ready to deploy in the needs of the Navy and the needs of the national government of what is going on worldwide. We need to put people downrange.
All right, we're talking with Mike Montes, candidate for Onondaga County Sheriff. He's a Democrat. We are interested in your questions or concerns. What would you like to see happen in the Sheriff's Department? What would you like in your next sheriff? Do we have a question?
Yeah, Max says, how will you prevent racial bias from affecting SRO's actions in schools and while handling difficult situations?
There you go.
Great question. So one of the things, now the SRO program is very important to me. I want to see a county-wide view of the SRO program. The city has a
School
program,
resource
officer.
We want to get, yeah.
Well, I think the city also calls us a school information resource officer.
Okay.
But first I want to quickly explain what is that, and then I'll get to Max's question. But what to me it is I want to put a trained law enforcement officer who's vetted by the Sheriff's Department and vetted by the school district to put the right person in the job that one wants to be a mentor, a coach, and be a true resource to the parents, teachers, and the students. But we have to have the right person there, but we also have the person needs to be trained. So they need to have the ability to work with the kids, but look for trouble and look for issues that as they come up, instead of always being reactive. I think most of the things I would talk about is I want to get away from law enforcement always being reactive. We need to be ahead of things. That's why I believe in community policing, and the school resource officer is a model of what I believe community policing is.
So his question was about racial bias. How do you deal with that if that's the concern? How do you deal with that? What does he say? Potential racial bias.
Potential racial bias. So again, putting the right person there is what it starts with. You also have to create a culture within the Sheriff's Department that looks for, one, we give our officers the right training, our deputies get the right training, the right perspective. But then we also need to teach our folks, and they need to know that this racial bias or racial profiling or any of these sorts of things do not work in law enforcement, and it's something I'm never going to condone as sheriff. But what we need to look for is suspicious activity. It's not that you don't target people based on who they are or their color of skin. You target them on their actions or their inactions or problems that they're having or facing. Get the intelligence on what you see and what you hear and what you feel and what teachers would tell you, what parents would tell you. Get a better picture so you know what the problems are.
So why are you running for sheriff?
So I'm running for sheriff for one simple reason, and it's something I ask myself every single day. And because running countywide, especially as a first-time candidate, is an arduous task. But what I found is what gets me through every single day is I want to do one simple thing, and that is to make a difference in the lives of the people of this county. And some people say, well, that sounds kind of cliche-ish. Well, it's not, because it's what I believe, and it's also something that I want to take all my years of federal service that I've used around the country and in different parts of the world to bring it back here to this community, because this community needs attention in several areas.
Let's just talk about some of those areas. One of the main concerns that a lot of people have is about the Justice Center. And what is your thought about what you can do about the Justice Center, and what's your opinion about the state of the Justice Center right now?
Well, I think the Justice Center is a mess right now. In February, the Commission on Corrections rated it, as they do, I'm sure, all jails around the state. But it was rated as one of the top 5 problematic jails in New York State. It was up there with Rikers Island, which is going to close soon. But what did they say? It was overcrowded, it was understaffed, it had deplorable conditions, concerns about medical coverage. These are big issues. But the other thing I'm concerned is I want to see people treated with dignity, because these are people that have not yet been convicted of crime and may not be convicted of a crime. So they're awaiting a trial or some other court proceeding while they're in the Justice Center. So we need to go back to innocent before proven guilty. They're presumed innocent being there, as opposed to maybe you don't know what's going to happen when you're there. So we need to do a better job of taking care of the people that end up there.
We're talking with Mike Montes. He's a candidate for Onondaga County Sheriff. He's running as a Democrat. That's what the sign says back there. And of course, you're in the United Democrats of Onondaga County. So if you have a question, Facebook Live Monday night right now, hit us up in the comments and we'll get your question to Mike. And our next question is...
Cheryl asks, how can the Sheriff's Office partner with local police departments to ensure the safety of our communities?
So how can you partner with local police departments to ensure the safety of our communities?
Well, the top part is that the top law enforcement agencies need to work together. I'm concerned about the chief of police of every municipal department needs to work closely with the sheriff, and the sheriff needs to, they should be on a first name basis, but they should be friends. I'm concerned about some of the departments do not work closely with the sheriff's department. That needs to change. So that's the big thing. A culture needs to change from the top. And once we have that kind of culture change, then we need to partner with on different task forces. I give the example of the Onondaga County Drug Task Force. I believe that should be led by the sheriff's department. It's currently led by the district attorney's office. We need to have that. The sheriff needs to have an integral role and a leadership role in that drug task force.
What should the relationship be between the Syracuse police chief and the Onondaga County Sheriff? Shouldn't that be a good working relationship?
That's the two largest agencies in the county.
And is that relationship, how is that relationship now?
My understanding is it's not very good. And I don't know all the stories behind it. It's really not my business to know those past stories. Only know what the future is. And the future for me, whoever Mayor Walsh selects as the next chief of police, I plan on having a very, very close relationship and work regularly with it. They're literally a block apart. The offices are a block apart. So it's somewhere I'm going to be quite often.
All right, let's get back to you. Our next question, please.
How do you feel we can transition our county from one that locks up addicts to a county that utilizes rehabilitation tactics?
Yeah, are you going to embedded in that question, it seems to me, about prosecution and criminalization. We just had an arrest today of someone, well, kind of famous for marijuana, but what about that? And this is your ballywick, right? This is your area, drugs.
This is where I have a lot of experience. I think, first of all, the Sheriff's Department will continue to disrupt, dismantle criminal organizations, bring in poisons to especially addicted people. We need to slow that supply down as much as we can. But that's what we've been doing my whole career. That's what we've been doing. The war on drugs is to go after and disrupt that supply as much as possible. But you have to do something about demand. We have not done a great job about slowing down the demand. Now, what I see is that we work with the medical community, work with mental health professionals. We have some of the vast resources in this city that can help solve not solve these problems, but work to find a better resolution for people. And if that means that we only save a few lives, it's better to save a few lives and try than not do what we're doing now. We're still going to lose people. So we need to change it's a paradigm shift. It's looking at things from a different perspective to look to try to get people from the addiction problems that they have and work with it. And it may take 4, 5, 6 times of them going through the process in order for them to be on the road to recovery.
So we need to do a better job, you say, then, of treating people who are addicted not as criminals, but as someone.
Yeah, but we need to get the resources to them, because otherwise they're constantly through the Justice Center, and then the Justice Center becomes a rehabilitation center, which is not really what it's designed for. So, and then it also means working with the courts as well to kind of help alleviate some of these issues in the Justice Center.
One of your platforms talks about fighting the opioid crisis and treating addiction and working with the community. Is this part of that?
Absolutely. That's absolutely what I believe in bringing together the full resources of the county to solve the problem together, not just one on its own, where the sheriff's department it handles one portion of it, disrupt, dismantle those organizations bringing the drugs, and then you've got the medical side trying to solve the problems. But many times the first responder would be the deputy on the scene. We did see some results from having Narcan available to our deputies that kind of brought some of the overdose down a little bit in this county. In 2016, we led the state per capita in the number of overdoses to the opioid crisis. What we're seeing now is it's slowing down a little bit, but I don't see the problem solving. I think it's just we have maybe a little bit lower number of overdoses, but we still have more. The problem still exists.
And let me pretend to know what Narcan is.
So basically, this is a drug that you could give to somebody that basically is going to help save their life when they're in an overdose situation.
Okay, very good. Your questions that here at the United Democrats of Onondaga County, Mike Montes, who is a candidate for Onondaga County Sheriff. Let's talk about gun safety. That's another issue that you're running on. What do we need to consider around gun safety in our community?
So this goes back to, we talked briefly about the school resource officer program. So what I see in that program, now there's many facets of what an SRO will do, and many do a great job today of. But the other thing is having a plan in place countywide for the different issues related to gun safety. Now we're talking about the situation like we've seen in Parkland last early or late, was it late spring or in February, where we had a very traumatic situation. We need to have the people available and trained together countywide in order to understand this. And whether that comes from the sheriff's department, from the city, from the other municipal departments, we need to work together as a county, and not necessarily as one agency, but as one county to help each other out.
We got a question. Let's go.
Frank asks, how will your work experience correlate to the role of sheriff?
How will your work experience correlate to the role of sheriff? I'm just repeating the question.
Thanks, George. What I bring, most importantly, is a big picture perspective. I've been in many places around the world. I've led organizations overseas. I've led organizations in Washington, and I've led organizations here in Syracuse. I know when we need to shift resources for different priorities. Instead of having someone who gets very focused on this is what we've always done, it's not that way. You have to look at what's the particular issue that you're faced with today to put the right resources to it. And that's the experience that I can bring.
All right, one more question. Let's go.
How will you protect our local community of immigrants from inhumane treatment, racism, xenophobia, and deportation?
That's a good question.
It's a great question.
Should I repeat it? Yeah, you got it. All right.
I think I got it.
Okay.
So this is something that I feel pretty strongly about. And I had somebody very early on in the campaign tell me that, you got to be very careful with this issue. And I'm like, no, I don't need to be careful with this issue. I know exactly how I feel, and I know exactly where I come from, because 15 years with the U.S. Customs Service, it was kind of the sister agency to immigration because we didn't enforce immigration. But I understood the problems that immigration faced, but I'm also concerned about what are we doing about it as a county sheriff's department. So my biggest thing is, in order for somebody to be placed in the Justice Center, there must be a valid judicial order or a document that is coming from a federal judge that puts that person in our facility. Meaning that, say, remanded to the custody of the U.S. Marshal Service and then would be turned over with our agreement with the Sheriff's Department. But without that, there's this discussion about detainer notices. And that's agreement between an ICE officer and a Sheriff's Department deputy. And there's no court action related to that. So I will not have that. And the thing is what that does is, my concern is if we put people in the Justice Center not on, say, a criminal charge or something that's covering us from the federal government, like a federal judge, we're now putting ourselves in jeopardy because of the potential liability of holding somebody without proper order.
So you got how many deputies who work for you?
So
Who will? Oh, listen, not work for you. Who would potentially work under you, right?
So I think it's somewhere around 1,000. We just added 100. I believe it's 197 personnel from Jamesville in January. Then we brought them over. So it's a large department.
Yeah. All right. Because so Janesville is now under the direction of the sheriff's department. What about Janesville, and what reforms perhaps are needed there?
Well, first I got to say a funny story about Jamesville.
Okay.
So in June, my wife and I are driving past Jamesville, and we see that the county commissioners, the county executive's name was still on the sign. I'm like, why is that? And so I mentioned it at some forum or something I was with, and a few days later it was changed to the current sheriff. So I just thought that was interesting. Are they not paying attention to what's going on in Jamesville? Couldn't change the sign. So anyway,
Yeah.
But so what's going on there? I met with some defense attorneys the other day. I'm getting more of a perspective, and they really appreciate the fact that they're going to have a sheriff that's listening to the other side. Because what's important is, one, that they have access to their clients. They get privacy to talk to their clients. And I hear similar things from the Justice Center that's going on at Jamesville. So we need more attention there.
I guess the main thing that people want to know, how will you keep the community safe as a sheriff?
So it's a big county, it's a big job, but the most important thing is having the right resources in the right place at the right time. Obviously, we have two big facilities, which is a big important aspect of the sheriff, is the Jamesville and the Justice Center. But at the same time, we have patrol, we have investigation, we have navigation. It's a full up large department that we're going to commit the resources to this county in order to protect people, especially all the areas that the patrols need to be taken care of with as well.
I get to ask a question right from here. So here we go. And Deborah wants to know, how will you support humane treatment for our incarcerated youth? There's been some reports about treatment of youth. How will you make sure that there's humane treatment?
One of the biggest concerns that I felt with this race is, I had learned early on in my campaign that there was solitary confinement of juveniles. I've not long ago I read the full lawsuit. It was a federal lawsuit against the sheriff's department, which the current sheriff fought for whatever reason, but he's defending the use of solitary confinement of 16 and 17-year-olds in the Justice Center. This practice really appalls me, and appalls me to this day that we came to this sort of way we're dealing with our youth. This is something that we need to look at. And number one, it's never going to happen under my watch. But number two is, how are we dealing with problems or issues of our youth that are in our facilities? First of all, they need to have programs. Second of all, they need to be educated under New York state law. It's a requirement to do. So there was also a problem with that. So we need to have programs for them and opportunities for them, because if we don't have anything for them, they already have problems at home, and now they're locked up in a facility.
So you see yourself coordinating with other entities within the community?
Absolutely.
Tom wants to know, how will you work with ICE, given that Syracuse is a sanctuary city?
So again, I think this is something that I don't have any problem with where I'm going to come from with this answer. I will support ICE like any other law enforcement agency in the event of critical incident or call for officer assistance in certain matters. I will not work joint investigations with them. And when I say that, and not so much investigation, because a lot of times you're talking about really just detention and removal, as opposed to criminal investigations, which is a different matter. I will not agree to the detainer notices. So if a retainer notice comes into the Justice Center, in and of itself, to hold somebody for a period of time, I will not honor it, because that's an agreement between a law enforcement officer and another law enforcement officer versus coming from the federal court. If it comes from the federal court, we will obviously hold them. But without that, that puts the county in a liability situation, because we don't have the authority to hold them.
All right, and there's your answer, Tom. We still have a few minutes left for you. A few minutes, yeah, we have a few minutes left. If you have a question for Mike Montes, he's a candidate for Onondaga County Sheriff. Facebook Live here on a Monday night. Thank you for joining us today. We're learning about Mike and his background and why he wants to be your next sheriff here in Onondaga County. About 1,000 employees, including Janesville Correctional Facility and the Onondaga County Justice Center, all under the sheriff's jurisdiction. And so it's a pretty big job. And if you have questions about the community coordination, you talked about talking with the other law enforcement entities within the county, working with the towns and the villages. A lot of people, this question comes up pretty often. Is there a need for further consolidation within our community?
I've heard that question a few times. I know that's maybe not in the near future. It's a possibility down the line, but I do know other jurisdictions that has worked well around the country. But this needs to be all stakeholders need to be involved in this. All stakeholders in the county need to be involved in this. This is not going to be just like the sheriff say, oh, we're going to do this. This is going to take a lot of resources, a lot of time and study to see if that is something this county needs and is best served. So certainly I will be involved in it and understand it and give my input and my direction from what the sheriff's department needs. But I think we're still a little ways from that, but I don't think it's not necessarily a bad thing. It could be a good thing. But the other thing I want to bring up though too, we were talking about coordination with law enforcement, but I think also, one, I talked to you and I said how we need to work together with all the law enforcement agencies, especially at the top. But I think as I've been running this campaign, one of the things I found, what I want to do in this campaign is the same thing that I want to do when I'm sheriff. And that is to get out in the community, understand the community, listen to the community. Obviously as sheriff, I'm not going to be able to give everybody what they want all the time. But if I'm listening, I know what direction I could take the sheriff's department. And that's what I've done in the campaign. I get to every possible event I can. And to me, I feel that makes a difference of what this county is about and who we are. And then how is that translates into the sheriff's part? Because the sheriff has a lot of control over a lot of aspects of people's lives in this county. And that's what I want to know, what their concerns are.
So what would you say is the main difference between you and your opponent?
I say I'm out there listening. And I go to every possible event. And I've only seen him at one event this year. And that was a media event that was, I think, 3 months ago. So what I'm not seeing him is out in the community. And that's my biggest concern, because we need to be out in the community, and this is a large community. We're 19 towns and 19 wards. It's a lot of people, 500,000 people in this county. We need to be listening. The elected official, the sheriff of the people, needs to be listening to the people, what their concerns are.
So what are you hearing out here in the community about what concerns people have? I know you have a platform, you talk about opioids, you talk about the Justice Center and your background leading large units. What are you hearing from the people?
These are all the things I'm hearing from the people. We designed this whole campaign based upon what we were hearing as we were talking to people. These are the big concerns. The issues, we were talking about Sanctuary City, we're talking about opioids, we're talking about Justice Center, we're talking about Jamesville, we're talking about gun safety. These are the concerns of this county. They're not all the concerns, but they're the concerns that are more universal throughout the county. And I know there's other issues, there's smaller issues. Like one thing that I heard several times about the Justice Center. If you have a family member that's in the Justice Center and you're 5 minutes late to go meet them, you're not allowed to go see them. So you have to come back another day and make another appointment. And I understand there's a schedule, but there's also could be, various reasons why somebody was a few minutes late. But these are the types of things we're hearing. But we also need to help understand what are the concerns of the community. And as I hear these things, this is the things that I want to bring to the Sheriff's Department to make a difference for people, which is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely comes down to how people perceive, how they work with law enforcement, how does law enforcement reflect the community that they live in, and what are some of those concerns. And so I think listening to you, I guess an overall question or an overall statement from you about what's it going to take for you to have a vision for the Sheriff's Department? What is your vision for the Sheriff's Department?
Well, my vision is to just improve. Well, there's internal things I need to do too. I need to change the culture of inside the Sheriff's Department to understand that the sheriff has your back. So let's take if there's a critical incident. So I want to make sure that this is understood too. Let's say a deputy is involved in a critical incident. My role is going to be to ensure that initially that officer gets the proper protections of what happened. So this is something I know very, very well. But as things progress, we will as the situation gets investigated, we'll find out what the issue is. But full transparency on what happens. So it's going to be number one. Okay, let's kind of take a break here. What happened, and go through it all. But the Sheriff's Department does have a shooting policy or a critical incident policy, is my understanding. So these are the sorts of things that internally I need to look at closely. So my vision overall, though, is to take these different issues and take them head on to improve them.
All right, we got a question.
How will you as sheriff help victims of the addiction epidemic?
Victim is the addiction epidemic. So these are the things as we were talking about earlier. We were talking about, one, not targeting people all the time to go through the Justice Center. So we're taking a more holistic look and approach at the problems that they're facing. Because a lot of times it's going to be a deputy that's going to be the first responder. And then we're going to bring the emergency management folks. They're going to be the ambulance and the EMTs to try to save this person's life. But ultimately, this is a person that's addicted, that we need to get the resources available to them and the types of problems that they have to, because otherwise we're just going through a revolving door.
I got one more question, Justin. Team here. What about responding to domestic violence calls at the county level? What kind of training, perhaps, do your officers need more training? Are you comfortable with how they might respond, or how do you feel about that?
That's such a dangerous thing for any law enforcement officer to deal with. One, regular ongoing training is important. There's various facets of that training that need to be constantly done, because you don't know any time that an officer goes to a call what's going to transpire there. It's one of the most dangerous things that law enforcement faces, because there's so many emotions are running high, and the problems that could quickly arise. It's very, very problematic. The more training, the more skills that a law enforcement officer obtains is going to be the skill set they bring with them, because you will respond based on your training. It always comes down to your training, because you have to think so quickly on your feet.
All right.
So difficult task, and it's going to continue to be a problem all across the country, and certainly here in Onondaga County too.
All right, Mike Montes is a candidate for Onondaga County Sheriff, running as a Democrat. And Mike, we wish you much success in your pursuit of the law enforcement title of Sheriff in Onondaga County. Good luck to you.
Thank you, George. I appreciate it.